showers for more than 90 seconds a day, limitations on how many times you can flush and even wash your hands. That is how people in Capetown, South Africa have been living for the last several months in a desperate bid to push back day zero as far as possible. Day zero is the day Capetown runs dry. That means no running water. It's been pushed to the 9th of July from 4th of June earlier, thanks to efforts of conservation made by city residents and a huge push from civic authorities. So how do people grapple with this in their daily life? To speak on this, I'm joined now by John Viljoen of Bloomberg News, who's also a resident of Capetown and has written about his experience in great detail. John, thank you for speaking with us. When I went through your piece, the first thought was, how did you get used to this? What is your daily life like with a cap of 50 liters of water per person?
Well, it's amazing how quickly you get used to the new routines. We fitted into this new system of showering, standing over a basin when we shower, catching that water and then pouring it out into buckets after our 90-second shower, as you described. That water then goes into the toilet. If there's a bit left over, we put it into what's left of our garden. So it's really amazing how adaptable people can be and how quickly you change and get used to a new situation.
You've put up a lot of pictures as part of your piece on those conservation efforts. What were the biggest challenges of getting used to using less water?
Yeah, I think it's making adjustments to washing laundry. You know, you have to put clothes on the quickest cycle you can find. So maybe you're not always that happy with the way things come out at the other end. You know, you have to do some washing in the shower quickly. I think the biggest sacrifice for a lot of people has been giving up on things like swimming pools. Across the city of ours, you'll see lots of swimming pools that are looking really grim and green and half full, where the water has evaporated and you're not allowed to fill up your swimming pool. It's against the law. And obviously people's gardens have suffered tremendously. A lot of Capetonians are very proud of their gardens, but these days, if you drive around the suburbs, you'll see brown grass. And a lot of my friends actually decided to give up on the grass and actually putting in fake lawns. So that's quite a good option. It looks good, it looks nice and green and lush.
You mentioned that the limit is 50 liters per person per day, but you've managed to bring it down, you and your family have managed to bring it down to 30 liters per person per day. What kind of everyday sacrifices does that entail? Can you wash your hands after every meal? How do you make sure everything is clean and hygienic? What does it really mean in terms of little adjustments?
Yes, hygiene is obviously a big concern. So we do wash our hands often, of course, but whereas in the past you might have just let that water flow down the plug hole, now you wash your hands over a little basin perhaps and catch the water so you can use it again. Also, you've got to be really careful when you brush your teeth to catch that water. The biggest sacrifice, I suppose, has been around the toilet. You know, you're so used to always flushing your toilet after every use. But as we say here in Cape Town, if it's yellow, let it mellow, and we flush far less frequently. That's probably for many people the biggest adjustment, especially in the work environment. Like you can imagine an office situation or a school. That's when it gets really interesting.
I wonder, has everyone been as participative in this conservation drive? Does everyone, the rich, the poor, the middle class, pitch in as much? Or is there a difference for the ones who can perhaps afford more water? Is that a situation as well, or is it very evenly distributed right now?
No, I think that's a good question. I think for some of the richest people in the city, not everyone has bought into the saving regime. I think some of the wealthiest people here have simply sunk boreholes so they can drill for water on their own property and then use that water to do the things that they need to do. So they perhaps haven't felt the impact. a lot of Capetonians have really done well in saving. Although the city wants us to use 450 million litres of water a day, we're still using 523 million litres, so we're still using more than we should. Also, I would just like to mention that for many of the poorer people in Cape Town, the way that I'm living now and being inconvenienced is their reality for their lives. It's how every day is really for many of the poorest people in Cape Town. So perhaps there hasn't been as big an adjustment required there.
What does it do to your social experience and in the way people react with each other, knowing that day zero is coming? It may have been pushed back, but you don't know if the winter rains will be fine. You don't know if everyone's playing their part. What does it do to people who live together in that pressure as a society?
Yes, you do feel there's a lot of anger when you hear about people who aren't observing the restrictions. So if you drive past somebody who's got a lovely green lawn, you're very suspicious of how they manage that. People do post on social media if they see people not following the rules. In fact, the city also puts out a map which shows individual houses and their water consumption. So you can actually track houses, they're color coded to see who's actually reduce their water use. It does create a bit of tension. There are certainly certainly been some difficult social situations. I know we're at one of the natural springs in the city where people are queuing. Tensions have run high at times, and city security officials have said that there's been a few altercations and fisticuffs, people fighting over their place in the queue and fighting over the water collection.
You know, large parts of India and people living there in a city like Mumbai, where I'm speaking to you from, we're no strangers to water shortages. But sometimes there's a huge difference in those who have and those who have not, in terms of how much you suffer. Do you think it's a more egalitarian situation in Cape Town, where civic authorities are making sure that everyone does their part?
Yes, I think this has been, well, put it this way, I think it's been a big leveler. I mean, so like I was saying earlier, for me, living in a very nice part of Cape Town, in a relatively nice house, I'm now having to do things that people in perhaps the poorer area do quite routinely. So I think it's been a good leveler, and the city is trying to treat everyone fairly. We're all being asked to do our bit. And in fact, if day zero does come, and we hope it won't, but if it does come, we will all have to queue up at 200 collection points around the city, and that's just going to be a tremendous shock to most of the population here. But luckily, the very poorest of the poor in Cape Town will be spared that. They will still have their normal centralized water supplies in those areas, which are often not very developed and characterized by informal housing.
You know what's very fascinating, John, about your entire account is how this seems like a dystopian future, but it's something that people are actually experiencing. What's your greatest learning from what you have experienced and you can share with us?
I would think the greatest learning definitely is how much water we waste. First of all, let's try and use water twice whenever we use water. And the second thing I would say is that I will never go back to using the water the way I did before. I haven't personally had a bath for 4 months, and I can't imagine feeling comfortable having a lovely long bath again, but perhaps I will one day. But definitely the biggest learning has been to appreciate water and to realize how much of it we simply let run through our fingers.
Thank you, John, for sharing your story with us.